Hey there, and thank you so much for making the Parable Podcast a part of your day. I'm Danielle Zapchenk, and today you're in for a treat because we are going to have a conversation with my man, my husband, Eric Zapchenk. You know, we talk about the fun parts about how we got together and dating and the not so fun parts of Eric picking up the pieces after his first marriage.
I mean, it was like, how can this be possible? And I'm going home. I'm married, but my wife's going home with somebody else. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I put myself in that position, but again, there were red flags that I should have seen that I didn't or didn't want to accept because, again, I had this plan. I thought this was the right thing.
All right, let's get to my husband, Eric Zapchenk. Today we are joined by a very special guest. He is the love of my life, Eric Zapchenk. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Wow, this place is cool. I can't believe this is a podcast place. Nice.
Eric is super familiar with the show. Obviously, you encouraged me to do this, but also you edited it to make me sound so amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for being you. And this is very interesting. I'm not used to being in this position. So, this is like a complete behind the scenes of the way the Parable Podcast exists. So
I thought it was important for people to hear your story. And I know you don't love sharing it, because it goes down. Sometimes when we have to share our stories and they're hard, it's not super fun. So, but I think that your story connects with mine and it continues the story for our kids and what our family looks like. And I think it's a real encouragement to people. So Eric, why don't you tell folks, what is your job day to day?
Dealing with you. No,
horrible.
Kidding. That was the marriage comment.
Got it.
Running a couple of radio stations in Chicago, a radio station in Huntley, our household alongside you, making sure the kids are alive the next day. But from the full-time perspective of a job, operations manager for 2 Chicago radio stations. So that's staffing and studios and a lot of the engineering stuff behind the scenes that when you listen to the radio, no one has any idea what it is, what it does, who does it. So I'm one of those people.
Would you say that radio was always something that you wanted to do? I mean, you grew up, your parents owned a liquor store, and that was what you thought maybe going to do, run that. Or did you have bigger dreams? How did you radio sounds interesting?
Radio sounded interesting in college only because it was a class that you could, take as part of your schedule. And that was fun and great. But I mean, all along, the idea of having a business was not necessarily part of what I wanted to do. It was a great opportunity in our families, if that was something that would be handed down from generation to generation, which it was from my grandfather to my father. But I just wanted to do something different. It was very difficult once where I had to speak with my father and say, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to go and not make any money and spend a lot of savings and go on my own path and do this radio thing after I sat through a couple classes in college. But I was a quiet kid in class. I loved being in the back of the class. Our last name being Zapchenk, Z. We were always either in the back of the class or the first person in the last row up in the front. And I hated that, but I loved being in the back. So I always wanted to hide behind stuff. I didn't need to be the center of attention. So business owner, not really. Just wanted to do my own thing. Yeah. So this whole radio thing was completely out of left field once I saw that I could create things. And that was extremely exciting to me. And then in college, it's all I wanted to do. It was ever consuming for college. Yeah. Kids would go home over the weekend. I'd stay at school and I'd be in the radio studio. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of cool because maybe just a couple of weeks ago, I recognized that how God was utilizing both of our gifts at the same time. I was hesitant to do a podcast just because, I had my own ideas in mind or how I thought life was going to go or what I wanted to do. And you said something different. Maybe you're a little bit more in tune with God. I don't know.
Maybe.
But the cool thing is I have seen how your gifts and talents of editing and understanding certain things just really combine with mine. And so that has been really amazing to see. And so going back to, we met each other. Technically, I thought it back to, it was the summer of 2004. I was going to school at Trinity International and I needed to have an internship before I graduated. So it was the summer between my junior and senior year. And I knew you, but it's not like we had any connection in that sense of I had to work with you side by side because I worked in promotions. Eric works in operations, which is the more technical aspect. And so I would be out and about at events and things like that.
Totally different departments, literally on the other side of the radio station. So the paths usually would not cross.
Yeah, it wouldn't. So I knew who you were. And I also knew that you were about to get married. And so you were about to have a ring on it. So I didn't even think, I wasn't even in that mindset. You know, I was there for an internship. And
I was not even available.
You were not available. And so, you know, the internship ended and I kind of worked on and off at the radio station. And then my first job I ever had out of college, I was at the Brookfield Zoo. And about a year into that, my boss from the radio station said, hey, would you like to come work at WYLL or WIND, two Chicago radio stations? And that's how I ended up back at the radio station. And then I met you again. And I was kind of taken aback because you weren't married now. You had gotten married and you weren't.
There was a whole episode of drama as the world turns may have been filmed in the radio station. It was pretty epic as to why the perception that you had coming back was completely different.
You know, I know going back and talking about our stories, especially in the past, it's uncomfortable because one, we just don't remember just because time has passed. And we don't, for us, I don't think either of us choose to stay in that mindset of like, we're going to just live in the past. I don't think God wants that for us.
That just seems unhealthy. It doesn't feel like it's productive. I mean, you can assess what you went through and learn from it. And that's really the whole goal of anything that you suffer through is to learn something from it. Mm-hmm. But if you wallow in it day after day, I think that's borderline depression then, isn't it?
Yeah. Or just, I mean, it's not healthy for sure. So, Eric, I know we're going to go back and there is a point to this. There's a reason, I think, why we want to share your story today to help others and to encourage and know that they're in the brokenness that there is healing. So can you take us back? I left the radio station and you were going to get married. And then what happened?
Well, if memory serves, which at this tender age of what I am, being old, it may be a little convoluted, but we'll get through it. Being in radio or trying to earn your stripes in radio, you have to give it all you've got, and you do it for a season. And that's something that I've learned with us in our dating and our marriage is that there's always a season, and it wasn't so clear back then, but it is now. So I guess that's one of the lessons that I've learned. But that season of you have to just do 100% or 110% to make it in radio. So you have no life. You basically have very limited social interaction outside of the walls of the radio station. So you see people, you hang with people, your friends and all that. So basically there was somebody at the radio station. We started being interested in each other, and then we dated, and it was quick, and we ended up getting married, which was fantastic. It was great.
In case you missed it, that was sarcastic. And what do you mean
sarcastic.
What do you mean?
There was a time where basically we were married for legally 6 months and 1 day, but within 3 weeks after the wedding, she was gone. She was already with somebody else, and they worked at the radio station too. Mm-hmm. So now you can see where we're getting into As the World Turns or All My Children or whatever, as soap opera is starting. So this gentleman who worked at the radio station had just come from another radio station where he had a crush on her. She did not respond. I have to believe that there was some issues in her family that caused her to go through all of this. I mean, this is planning, a large wedding, a lot of money, all of this to then know you're going to leave and then be with somebody else makes no sense to me personally. Communicate. But that was part of the problem in our relationship. There was none of that. So going through all that, literally we were all three of us were working together. I was married to her and she was dating him at the same time. So we've skipped over a few things, but pretty much that's the bottom line is week after week, month after month, watching the woman that you have a ring on her finger, you have that commitment of marriage, for better or worse, sickness and in health. None of that was even thought of. It was a one-way street. It was not a two-way street. They would go to lunch together. They were going to look for an apartment together. And this is all during the work week. This is all at the office. So, I mean, it was fantastic to go into work every day to a place where you were trying to give 110% of yourself because you have to excel above and beyond the competition outside the station or within the radio station to make sure you do a good job. because it's very competitive. But now you have this drama that's just draining you emotionally and borderline physically, and push through and hope that it all works out. And, even to the point where it was like counseling or, can we, whatever we can do, can we make this work? Absolutely not. It was not a good situation at all.
Well, so when you say that, absolutely not, that was on her end. So you were, as one who just got married, I mean, you were trying to make it work.
That's what I was telling myself, was that, like the career, I was giving 100% of what I thought was right. So, hey, what's wrong? How do we fix this? Can we talk with somebody? Can we create the situation and review in a month? None of that mattered.
Yeah.
All right. So I knew that in this process that eventually it would be, I've done the best I can, and I'm not at fault here. There's other circumstances that are pulling us apart, and in the long run, obviously the best thing in the world that needed to be done.
Sure. Looking back at it, I mean, I think that you could see certain red flags were happening prior to even getting married. I remember you telling me that, on the way to your wedding rehearsal, you had looked over and you had said to her, like, are you sure? Like, is this what you want to do? Is that true?
Wow. You remember that stuff?
Heck yeah, I remember that.
That must be the difference between men and women, because I would forget that and you remember that. I honestly don't remember. That's one of the things that when we were kind of prepping up for this conversation, there's parts of the past that I don't remember. It's been put into a part of the head where in the mind I don't even want to access anymore, which is great. I know that sounds like something that I would do, because it would be like, hey, you got a chance to get out. Are you sure you want this? Are you unhappy? Do you need an exit plan? Can I help you with that? A red flag too should have been, I was trying too hard. It wasn't a two-way street. Family history on her side probably wasn't the most ideal evidence for a good case of marriage. Other than that, I mean, yeah, there were all kinds of red flags, but I was pushing through because that was my plan. Those were my thoughts. That was my direction. And nothing like having a plan and being told, nowhere close, buddy. You have no chance of making this work, and you are completely thinking wrong.
Tell me what it was like after you would go home at night after working in that kind of environment where she was there and he was there, and you're literally just trying to work, but you had to go home. And what were some of the emotions that were running through your head at night?
Regret. How stupid could you be to let this happen? How's it affecting other people? What's my image at work? I'm now the weird guy that's hanging out in my office all day with the door closed and the blinds closed, but the blinds open just enough so I can see who's walking by, and then end up, are they walking out together? Confusion would be another one. Watching them go off to lunch and go sign a lease on an apartment. I mean, it was like, how can this be possible? And I'm going home. I'm married, but my wife's going home with somebody else. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I put myself in that position, but again, there were red flags that I should have seen that I didn't or didn't want to accept, because again, I had this plan. I thought this was the right thing. I wanted kids, wanted a family. She had a kid from another relationship. That was just what kind of was going on. But going home, it was a relief to leave, but then getting home, and then when you're in the quiet, your mind starts running, and you're your worst enemy. All the emotions of, I have to go back tomorrow, I have to watch this again, I'm confused of why I'm in this, what did I do wrong?
Tell me, what did you think about God at that point in your life? I know you grew up very differently, like from a faith background than I did. Maybe a little. There's some similarities. But I grew up and I understood what a relationship with Jesus was at like 5th, 6th grade. Do you think you knew what a relationship with Jesus was at that point in your life?
I was aware, but I don't think, what I understand now and what I knew then are completely different. Being raised Catholic, nothing wrong with that. And that's what my parents, it's how they chose to raise us. But it was church on Sunday. It was Sunday school, Christmas, Easter. And, there wasn't a lot of discussion about faith. It was work. It was family. It was just spending time together. And, it was just a normal day to day. We never really went deep into faith. It's a little ironic that this career that I've chosen, I'm at one of the largest Christian broadcasting companies in the country. We're heavily engaged in our church, leading ministry teams, both of us. So, if you look back, that's not what I thought I would ever be doing. One of the pivot points, I think, where I was able to just say, I'm at the bottom. Like the proverbial rock bottom through the drama, coming home one night and just laying on the floor in the living room and just going, God, what did I do? That was so unlike me. You'd pray, but it was very casual. usual, but deep, dark confusion and regret, laying on the living room floor going, God, what did I do? Why is this happening? How can I get out of this? I'm done with this. Absolutely done with all of this. I just need to do everything different. And how do I do this? And show me that. And that's where I said, I'm not going to try dating. I'm not going to try reaching out and, being social. I'm just going to be me. And, I think that's where you know the next part of the story.
Yeah. And let me just say this, obviously I love you, but to know that somebody would hurt you in that way, gosh, you just you can't imagine the emotions that you were feeling through that. And to know that you had to go through that, I know there's a reason, and that's why I'm here. But gosh, it's sad to look back.
It is sad to look back, but it's also a positive. You have to go through those dark times to learn and all that. But it just, obviously it wasn't fun. There needed to be a change of direction. Yeah. I learned you have to communicate. And what's one of the foundational principles of our relationship and of our marriage and what we're teaching our kids is open your mouth.
Yes.
Even if you think it's awkward, speak your mind, communicate. I'm trying to do that more and more with the family. And it feels good. And that's one of the biggest things that I pulled out of that was let's talk. It may be awkward, but we're all family. We should all know what's going on. And that wasn't what she thought. She didn't see any of that stuff. I don't think she even appreciated the hell that she was creating. And that was the sad part. Do you not see this? Do you not see the destruction that you're doing? I've got very few regrets in my life. I've got one major regret is that through all this, until we got together, you and I experienced losing my grandfather, and my grandfather would have been the biggest fan of our kids. And I screwed that up. That's my biggest regret, is that because I had to learn this lesson, which you could say, well, that's a positive, and I agree. But that's the one thing is, had I made better decisions, I wouldn't have this regret. But if I made different decisions, you and I wouldn't be together. We wouldn't have the two awesome kids that we have, and we wouldn't have this great family network and the relationships we have and the friendships that we have.
Well, and I just think, Eric and I, just so you know, we're 10 years apart. I happen to be his trophy wife, okay?
Yep.
And so I think, timing wise, where I was, where you were, it just wouldn't have made sense. So let's connect the dots. Mm-hmm. So I had come back to the radio station to start working, and it was at the height of Dancing with the Stars, okay? That's important, okay? People were loving it. They were taking their dance classes, and I had been in musical theater, and so I'm like, oh gosh, that sounds so much fun. I would love to take some ballroom dance classes. And I had asked my brother, who was living in the area, and one, he's like, no, okay, and two, he has stuff to do. It just didn't work out. And somebody suggested at the radio station, well, why don't you ask Eric? And I'm like, why?
It's not like I can dance or anything.
I don't know. I don't know if they were trying to set us up or if they were just saying, here's a guy who's single and he's available. And in my mind, let me just preface what I thought. I wanted a husband from day one of college. So I imagine someone who's strong in his faith. He loves singing and dancing, okay? And he's never had sex in his life. He's never been married. He's someone that's similar to my age, somebody that I don't work with. So we list all of those things out, and
all big red X's right there next to there's no chance.
Ridiculous to say that out loud. And I was just telling a friend the other day at coffee, and she kind of God's just thank you for your input, but I have other plans. So anyways, Eric and I, we ended up doing this dance class together, and this wasn't Fred Astaire studio dance class. This was Mount Prospect
Park
in
District.
A basement. Everybody was there learning for their wedding. We were just there, and we would go out to dinner every week and just get to know each other, because in my mind, this was just a friendship. This is all this was going to be, because I had these ideas in my head of who you were, and I was putting these preconceived notions on you. And I remember looking across this dance floor door. And I'm just like, why is this guy here? Why did he say yes to this? So
I said yes to this because at that point it was, I have tried everything that I can to do what I thought was right, meet my expectations, my preconceived notions of where I should be at that age, 10 years older than you. And I had failed, 100% failed. And I, for those friends and fans of Seinfeld, I had said to myself, I will be opposite George. So everything that you think you should be doing, say the opposite. So when you came and said, hey, you want to go to a dance class? Original would say, nope, I'm busy, don't dance, don't care, don't want to be there. But at that point in my life, that was after I had learned things, and I said, I have to just change the way I'm doing things. Yes, I will go to a dance class, in my own head, be very uncomfortable, go outside the box, and see what happens.
I remember sitting after dance class one night, very specifically. We were outside of Dunkin' Donuts, Baskin Robbins combination, okay? We were on the corner, like sitting on a parking
curb.
And I was going through every reason of like what I'm looking for in a husband or somebody who I want to spend my life with. I wasn't specifically talking to you, but in that moment, you had seen me. I mean, you're probably like, this girl's amazing. So you saw it in a different light. You were taking each of those checklist points and being like, well, I'm just not adding up to that. Do you remember?
Absolutely remember that, not like it was yesterday. So going, okay, hey, you have been put in the friend zone, my friend. There is no chance. And that was hard for me, on a couple different levels. But I mean, that was, well, she must like me in some capacity. We're hanging out because it was very difficult to have women as friends socially.
Yeah.
Work is one thing, but in my mind, if you were going out with somebody one-on-one, obviously this is not just friends. I didn't have time to just go and hang out with friends. That was just something that I didn't do. Mm-hmm. So like, oh, well, if we're going out, we must be going out for some reason. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it took some time, and then people started joking around at work like, oh, you guys are dating. And I was a little frustrated with that. And I remember you needed some help maybe in the fashion department. Okay.
Not maybe in the fashion department, completely in the fashion department.
You were wearing white tube socks with sandals. Okay. And that wasn't going to work if you were going to look for somebody else. Okay.
Yeah, but that was the best I could do at that time.
So I remember we had gone to a Target. We were standing in like the shampoo aisle, and I just like straight up said, hey, do you like me like that? I was so oblivious. And do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. And what do you remember saying? Anything?
Didn't I say yes? I thought this was going somewhere.
And then I was just like, wait a second. Like, I don't know what to think in this moment. I'm not sure. Again, you're not doing the checklist. And I think that's what I do with a lot of parts of my life. And this is kind of maybe my own parable thing of you have these expectations, but God has far bigger expectations and what he plans on doing in your life. And so long story short, we ended up together. We did. I remember kissing you in a closet, okay, at a party.
Yes.
It was nuts.
Do you happen to remember the DTR conversation on the fourth floor of the parking garage in the back of the radio station vehicle, sitting with the hatch open and literally going, this is what we need to do, or however we ended it. But that was the DTR, the determine the relationship conversation.
Yes. I feel like we had a couple of those because I just wanted to be in high school. I had a relationship with a guy who didn't know Jesus. And I think that he chose to know Jesus in a sense only because my parents asked them to. And he knew that in order to be with me, he had to go to church. And so there's this scary part, once you're out of high school and you're thinking, oh, wow, this is an adult relationship. If we get married someday, are we going to have issues like raising our kids? Do you believe the same things as me? So there was this real struggle that I had internally. And I think that's just about growing up in general. And also, there's many times, even while we started dating, that I had asked you repeatedly, like, how do you get to heaven? Like, how do you do this? And I remember one day you just told me, like, we were in the car and you're like, Danielle, I need you to stop. I need you. Like, I know. And you need to trust me that, you weren't some 16-year-old boy. You were a guy that was interested in me, and you were being honest and genuine and building your relationship with Jesus at the same time.
I remember that. See, part of the communication thing.
Yeah. And let me preface this. Like, we do our best to be communicative, okay? Are we 100% perfect on this? No. We will share the trampoline story another day. Oh, gosh. Okay.
It's a great story in our marriage.
Okay. It was good. We almost got divorced that day. I'm just kidding. But
if you ever have kids and you need a trampoline put together, pay somebody to do it. Trust
me. Or just call us first. Call us first. We'll tell you. So,
or read the directions.
Okay. So, babe, looking back, if you could talk to yourself that night where you were just like laying on the ground, sad, what would you tell yourself if you could tell yourself something?
You are not in control of this. You have this mindset. You have this plan. You're trying really hard. Good job. You're trying really hard. You're not in the right place. Look at yourself the way I'm looking at you now. It's in my mind. I can see two people talking to each other. I would say, hey, you have to go and look outside yourself and go, you're doing this wrong. Don't try so hard. Probably a lot of the things that my parents had told me when I was growing up, I want to be cool. I want to do this. I want to do that. You don't have to be. Just be you. You're cool just by yourself. You can't do this on your own. And that's where the rock bottom part of it all came in. It's like, obviously, God is watching over me in my life because I understand that, raised knowing God, knowing about God, knowing that there is a God, believing that there's faith, there's something else going on in my heart, my world. But you can't control it. You just have to do the best you can and step aside and just let it happen. Have that faith that you've been raised right, the common sense stuff, and that God loves you and that you're worth it and you shouldn't try so hard. And let go of it. I mean, control, I was trying to control. Every time I go out on the weekend, I want to do this so I can meet somebody, so I can, I want people to like me, so we're going to go do this or whatever. Just let it happen, which is kind of what happened when, the dance class, we were scheduled for that. It's like, just let it happen. We're going to, if it's to be, it's to be, don't try. I need to impress you from a social perspective, but here's what I am. If it's not good enough, then God's got it. Get out of your own way, teenage Eric, and just don't try so hard.
Yeah. I remember it was the night before Edie went into preschool, I think, and Reed, he was like about a year old, and we have a 1955 Chevy Bel Air. It was your dad's, and we were at a car show, and somehow, some way, we saw this certain car pull in, and this was one of the first times, and so it had been a lot of years, and she was there. Do you remember that?
I do.
So there's this awkwardness. It was at a far distance, and we were talking to each other, and you're just like, I feel like awkward, and I just looked at you and I said, babe, you have nothing to be ashamed for. You tried to make it work. It didn't. And look where you are now. We are in a loving relationship. We have two amazing kids. And there should be no reason why we cannot enjoy this evening.
Which was a lot easier said than done because there was a lot of hurt, a lot of bitterness. I honestly think that was probably part of the long-term healing process. It was that whole thing is like, hey, God's going to take something that I love being involved in, cars. That was a learning experience. But it also reinforced what I was saying earlier was that obviously there was some issues in her mind of how relationships were because she was at that car show with my former best friend and now they're living together and dating and all that. And it's like, so the pattern which I had seen was that before me, she would do the same thing. Why didn't I see that before? But it was so difficult to be in that situation. But your support on that was like, you did the best you could, let it go. But again, that awkward experience, God showing that you did the best you could. And by trusting me, look where you are now.
So for somebody who is going through, they have something in their past and they feel like either it's popping up, maybe it's just like internally, like they just feel those emotions from time to time, or maybe physically, like it's someone who you work with, what would be your encouragement to them or some advice of like how to work through that?
The first thing I would think would be to remind them that it's a season, which on its surface seems very shallow. It's like, yes, you're going through this and it will end, but it will. And sometimes the simplest reminder of something like that is important to hear. It will be okay. It does not feel good now. It doesn't feel the way you want it to be, but it'll end. And then just realize, secondly, that you bring something to the table. Unfortunately, in the situation right now, no one's seeing it, or maybe it's just not the right situation for you. And then I guess third would be you have to focus on trying to find something to take out of it and learn. What's the lesson in this? That was really what I had to do, was like, why are you in this situation? What over the last 10 or 15 years do you see consistency in your decisions? You're putting yourself in the same situation. You're hanging with the same people. Are there people that you need to not hang with? You need to create something new. And all of that kind of led in, I think, to how I got to that point. And I think God's showing that you have to stop doing what you're doing and do opposite to get anywhere. And that was really easy for me to understand. It's like, you've done it. You've screwed it up. Move on. Turn literally around and try something different. Mm-hmm. That would be the lesson part of it, is you have to whittle through everything when you can and say, I need to pull one or two good things out of this, because then at least it's not a waste. You don't feel like you're wasting your life or wasting your time doing this. You're pulling and you're learning, because if you don't learn, then it just even makes it more difficult.
I would say for me as well, having that checklist and the control of what I imagine, everything that I thought that I needed, God gave to me more abundantly in you.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I think that because of that situation, you are able to love me more. And that's what I ultimately need in a husband. So,
I really think communicating and having God as the foundation of our marriage, that's part of what makes us work.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, whether you are married or you're about to be married or you're single or whatever, in any relationship, it really comes down to communication. And ultimately, then it's that communication between us and God. And then if we can have that with Him, He's going to give us direction and He's going to give us guidance and wisdom. Because if we're questioning certain things in our life and we're saying yes to things, He's going to help us along the way. And sometimes we have to be patient in that. So I'm glad I was patient and waiting for you, babe, because you're fantastic and I love you.
Love you too. That was one of the other things on the communication side, learning that and seeing how you pray. And I have prayed more in the last 14 years. Back to that one-on-one relationship you asked earlier, was like, well, did you understand what a relationship with God was? And everybody always thinks, well, it's if you're talking to God, you're talking to yourself, and it's kind of, unique. Why are you doing that? But there's such value in every day, just a simple, it doesn't have to be this very traditional prayer, like we learned growing up. It literally is a conversation the same way we're talking now. It's like, I really want the best for our marriage. Please let me be what Danielle needs. How do I support her? I don't know, but just help me with that. That's a great lesson, just to rely on that. And it's not super hard. It's just be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, thank you so much for sharing today. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing the hard spots, but also out of those hard spots, there's some beauty in it. We have 2 kids, Edie and Reed, and they are fantastic. And I'm grateful that you are a part of my life and that we're going to be dancing our way into whatever comes in the future.
Well, you realize all those dance lessons really made the wedding reception incredible.
Yes, it did. High quality. So I'm going to pick out see if I can find some videos from our wedding, because people got to see these moves. Sometimes our past is never easy to walk back through. However, in those hardships, God, He is still at work. He was at work in Eric's life through all of that. And He was also at work in mine, because I had to strip down those expectations. And I was finally able to see Eric with the same grace that God does. If you want to be able to reflect more about what we discussed with my hubs, Eric, I have a few questions for you today. First, what are those expectations expectations that you have for yourself or maybe for others in your life? And how can you continue to add grace, kind of break down those expectations? And number 2, is it time for you to learn from the past and close that door? Maybe it's a past relationship, a past job, past financial opportunity, a past whatever. Are you missing being present for your life right now, what God has for you right now, because you still have one foot in what happened all that time ago? Thank you so much for listening to the Parable Podcast. It is just a pleasure to really be able to do this each and every week for you. Wherever you listen to podcasts, whether on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, I'd love for you to rate or review. It's just so amazing for us to be able to share this with other folks, and that's how they find out about the Parable Podcast. Also, if you want to chat or get to know me a little bit better, you can follow me over on Instagram or Facebook. I have extra content over there, some behind the scenes stuff, resources that are helping me grow and learn in my own faith, and I'd love to get to know you more. If you have any questions or you want more information about today's episode or how to get in contact with Eric or I, all the show notes are at daniellezapchenk.com. That is going to do it for today. Thank you for spending time with me. Remember, your parable, it showcases your past, but also your future. I'm going to see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.